There's a lot of avenues to it. Most everybody thinks that, you know, it's going to be a direct shot, or that there's some banker or investor just kind of waiting to throw money at film and whatnot. I live in Georgia, so as a result, for me, the Georgia Film Tax Credit has been invaluable in terms of being able to actually sort of begin to look at the budget of a project as something that's manageable. And not just manageable, but something that actually has opportunity. It's one of the reasons why Disney signed the contracts with Marvel, the Marvel and Disney have the contracts they had with Pinewood at the time and whatnot. I feel like understanding what the Georgia Film Tax Credit is probably going to be immensely helpful. So what is it? In order to get filmmakers to come to Georgia and work here, or at the very least here in Georgia, they offer it's like 30%, it's kind of ridiculous, refund on your total budget amount, your production budget. They've since added certain things. I think at the time, writers' rooms and different pre-production parts were not included. Those have recently been changed. I'd have to double check that. And I know that the idea of post-production has only also, in the last couple of years, finally been something that's come up. They've really begun to make all-inclusive the entire process of putting all those pieces together. So what is it? Well, first you have to understand, everybody thinks, oh, I'm gonna make a thing, they're gonna give me money back, this and that. Before you roll the first camera, before you hire the first anybody, you need to know if you're eligible or not. What does that mean? Typically, you have to have a production company. So what a lot of independent filmmakers have done is they've partnered with some production companies. I know that at the time, we were looking at doing some of that as well. We had a couple different partners who had, because reaching that, so there's a cap that you have to meet, which is $500,000. Now, that does not mean one project has to be $500,000. What that means is the total productions that you have done that year must equal $500,000. So let's say you are only trying to get into film, but you do some film work, you do have a production company, but you do commercial work, and maybe you do weddings or whatever else. So the eligibility is very important to understand whether or not your project is going to be eligible for that. Also understanding what your production company will be. And again, remember, the Georgia Film Tax Credit goes to your production company. Well, what does that mean? Well, okay, well, first off, you have to budget your planning. By that I mean you have to make sure that all of the aspects that you're going to be doing are allocated for, because that's the first thing they do. See, so one of the things people don't understand is it isn't just about getting Georgia's gonna make because of money and whatever else. What it's about is, are you putting people in Georgia to work? Very simple. It's actually the same concept most state tax credits are going to be looking at, is how much of the opportunity did you get in Louisiana and Carolina and New York and anywhere else you're going to go. The idea is you're putting people from that state to work. One of the things you have to do is you have to make sure you have to register your project with the Georgia Film Music and Digital Entertainment Office. This is a really important step. It ensures that you're going to be in the system, because if you're not in the system, then it's going to go less smooth. So if you want to go smoothly, make sure you register your project for sure. The other thing is making sure that you are filming actually in Georgia, which means if you're a production who, let's say you're not in Georgia, but you're coming here to do a piece and then you're leaving to do elsewhere, only the segment you do in Georgia would qualify you for the Georgia Film Tax Credit, not the whole project entirely. That's a very important distinction. Like anything else, maintaining very detailed records, keeping very meticulous look at every one of your, all your invoices, all your vendor sheets, all your deal memos, everything, start to finish. Have a diary. And accounting obviously is what we're talking about, but at the same time, I would go deeper. Having just, here's my QuickBooks or whatever else, or whatever software you're using, it's gonna be, here's my, tiny invoice account, or my whatever that you do online, fine. Understand something. I don't care how old school it is, they are draconian when it comes to these rules. Make sure you have, if you got to keep a binder or one of those accordion folder deals, whatever, like back in the day, do that. So this way you have as many detailed sets of things as possible. Finally, before you go into production, there's a list of actual auditors that the state approves. These are accountants who do strictly auditing for Georgia Film Tax Credits. So what you want to do is you want to get a pre-audit. The pre-audit is going to cost you some money, but that's okay. This is one of the few times where spending money ahead of time is worth it. So you want to go ahead and get that done. That's going to tell you roughly whether you're going to qualify for the film credit. And then what you do is once you're done, and that'll give you a kind of a pre-qual letter. That's going to come in handy in a little bit. So once you have that audit, make your thing. Go make your thing, whatever it is. Make your film, make your television show, make your commercial, whatever you're gonna make it. Once you're finished with that, you then wanna take that budget, that budget, along with that pre-qual authorization, that letter that said this is definitely certified, because all that, along with your registration, and then you wanna submit that for a genuine audit. So they changed the rules. It used to be before you had to do an audit, this and that. So many people were trying to pull fast ones and do kind of funny money business, that what they decided to do was they actually have an actual process now that is very meticulous and also takes time. And now you take and you sit here and you say, okay, we're gonna go ahead and take that and we're gonna submit it. And once you submit that, the process takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months before you get a letter back. Once you get a letter back, you're also gonna get, and you're gonna get your note, so to speak. It says your acceptance letter, if you will, that says you've been blah, 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 here's a dollar amount, this and that, okay? Now, what is the value in that piece of paper? Because the one thing that's funny, a lot of people will tell you is, tax credits are just credits on the taxes you're gonna pay, and this and that doesn't actually apply. That's like when people used to tell you as you started a business, oh, but you could do write-offs, as if write-offs were money. It's just paper. But what George has done, and this is the unique thing, that has monetary value. Now, at the time that we were getting into production, which was in the 2020, 2021 years, at the time it was 30 cents on the dollar was the overall thing total. It's actually 20, but you get an additional 10% for using the that classic Georgia Peach thing. Now, before you just go slapping the Georgia Peach thing at the end of stuff, there are very specific requirements. I'm talking placement on the screen, duration of time, how far away it is from other logos, if it's being used in an end credits, where does that live on the hierarchy of the end credits? So you have to make sure that you're following those explicit rules. Do yourself a big favor, just give them a call. The Georgia Film office is actually very, very easy to talk to. They understand that their business is to keep people working, and so they want to ultimately help, and they're actually very helpful. So reach out to them. They'll happily tell you all those specifications. But the problem is when people try to do stuff and not ask. Take the time, ask the question. Now that you've got your 30%, at the time, like I said, when we were doing this, it was, I want to say it was 85% of every dollar. So if 30% was what you got, let's say you have $1 million and you're gonna get 300,000 back or something, not 300,000, as a credit rather. Then what you wanna do is on that 300,000, it would be 85 cents on the dollar. So you're not getting the full amount back because you're selling it. You have the ability to sell that monetary value. Who do you sell it to? Well, you could absolutely sell it to a corporation who may be looking for, and there's different marketplaces for that kind of thing. Or you can go to a brokerage firm that actually specializes in those things because they handle high volume money. So what they want to do is they buy these credits so then they can help their clients assume that and get those. And ultimately they turn around, bam, get a check. You get a check and you can get a check cleared in, I don't know, 48 hours. You can get a deal. It's less, I want to say it was like 75 cents on the dollar, meaning you can get your money up front. What does that mean? Okay, now we get into the fun of what the Georgia Film Tax Credit and how it helps fund your project. So let's say you have a budget of, and we're gonna use real small numbers here just for the sake of explaining it. Let's say your project is $10,000. $10,000, you're gonna end up getting, $3,000 back or whatever else, or whatever. Once you can then say, okay, I want to go to one of these firms and say, here's my pre-audit certification letter, which essentially is like saying, I definitely have the money coming. And then here's the budget, here's everything else, blah, blah, blah. And then I think they'll run your credit and everything. And what they do is, because they're giving you the money up front, which by the way, they're happy to do, they're gonna pay, you're gonna make less, but you get it up front. So what does that do? On your budget, you should be able to have, here's our flat budget amount. And then there's another number, applied credits and refunds. That is where the line item for your Georgia Film Tax Credit would go, which then lowers your overall budget. Now, what's the value of that? If you have stakeholders, if you're a big studio, so Marvel, when they made a $400 million project in Avengers, in Infinity War, Endgame, whatever, they now get to tell their investors and the people who are back home, hey, back home being California, they get to tell them, hey, yes, you're gonna spend this, but before any profits happen, we've lowered the cost of the project because of tax credits. Now, the bonus is their profit is still based on the original amount of money, but the risk involved, what they're losing, has now lowered. It's interesting the way the math works out. And again, you have to be really kind of a corporate person to sort of care on that level, but it helps you as a filmmaker because you start showing people, as a producer, you show people, you know what you're talking about, and you understand how the flow of cash works, and you get how that money is going to be applied to your project and to its individualized budget. Very important understanding how these things work, because all of these things are part of the mix that makes funding your project possible. It's one of the things that I like to sit down when I go through when I do my producers consultations, and we sit down and we go through, hey, have you line budgeted? Are you this? Where does funding happen? How much is it going to cost for your project? Where can that money come from? Understanding, because literally when it comes to funding a project, there are 3 legs to the stool, so to speak. And understanding those legs is very important, because it's the difference between being able to, the money you save could potentially be the money that you can now turn around and put into, maybe we get a higher grade of actor. Maybe we're able to do a little bit extra line of VFX, some things that we were interested in doing we couldn't do before. Very budget-minded concepts, and all that starts from the line producing phase. So understanding those things is really important. I like to do these kind of consultations is, again, people don't know this stuff. You go into it thinking, Georgia Film tax credit, I make the money, whatever else. It's just not like that. So having realistic goals starts with understanding how the money flows. So yeah, that's one of the things that I try to do in those things. But yeah, understanding how the Georgia Film tax credit, or tax credits in general, can benefit your production, kind of an important thing.